All right, we're going to go ahead and get started today. I'm Samir, or I'm me, and then this is Samir over here. Today we're going to go over how to use Poly to measure and action every workflow in Slack. We're going to go over a bunch of different ways to use the new features that we've released and show how those features can help you get actionable insight from your feedback in Slack. Like I just mentioned, my name's Me. I do product marketing at Poly. You've probably seen a couple of my emails. Now we can finally put a face to the name. And yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samir. I'm one of the founders at Poly and have been working on Poly for about 3 years when we first launched Poly in Slack. And the product has actually evolved quite a bit over 3 years. So I'm pretty excited to share some of the functionality that's gone live over the past few months. And yeah, looking forward to it. So we can just get started. One of the things that we think Poly is really useful for is measuring every workflow in Slack. The thing that's happened over the past few years as Slack has grown as a tool is that, it's not just people are communicating in Slack, it's that they're bringing every aspect of work together in Slack. And it actually allows new kinds of work to be done, something that's a little bit more efficient because everything's happening in one place. And since Slack has set itself up as a place where work happens and a place where you bring all your new and old workflows, we see Poly as the layer that sits on top of that to measure those workflows. So where Slack is, where work gets done, Poly is how that work gets measured. And over the course of the past year or so, as people have gotten more engaged in Slack, we've seen our user base measure various workflows. And the most obvious one that happens with surveys and with a tool like Poly is to measure employee sentiment and employee engagement. So that's been really popular, but we've actually also seen various other parts of an organization get lit up with Poly. For example, IT departments are using it to measure software usage and how people are reacting to certain deployments. We have learning and development teams that are sending out quizzes based off of trainings that teams have taken. We've also had the ability to automate new hire onboarding to get feedback at various touch points once a new hire joins the team. One of the more popular use cases has been, agile workflows around engineering and product sprints. So where companies have used tools to measure bugs and product deployment over 2-week periods, Poly has come in as a tool to measure that. And one other scenario that we're pretty excited about that's relatively new and is in beta right now are trigger-based workflows. And this is essentially things happening in Slack or outside of Slack that trigger surveys, polls, or workflows that allow you to go collect feedback and collect sentiment once a specific event happens. So over the course of this webinar, we'll try to keep it short, but we'll show you the different parts of Poly that you can use. So this will be more of a feature-based webinar where we'll be digging into some of the functionality that exists. We do have videos on our site which allow you to dive into some of these areas in depth. And as always, our support team is available. If there's questions that you want to dig into a little bit deeper, we're always more than happy to do that.
And if you happen to have any relevant questions as we're going through these slides, please feel free to throw them in the question and answer box or in the chat, and we'll answer them as they come, or we'll just save them all for the end.
Cool. So we'll start with, the core part of Poly, which is creating a survey. We're going to go ahead and skip the part around creating a poll in Slack. That experience has been around for a long time. And one of the things that we see different between polls and surveys, like you'll hear the word poll and you'll hear the word survey. For us, the word poll refers to anything that's a single question, and survey is anything that's a group of more than one question. And so you'll have the ability to have a recurring poll or a recurring survey or a rotating survey. And I'll kind of go through some of this with you right now. So at a very basic level, you have the ability, sorry, let's get rid of that. So you have basically, this concept of your feed, which is a history of all the polls or surveys that you've asked before. And since we're starting with creating, there's a way to author in Slack, but we're going to cover the web for now because it has some of the more complex workflows. Once you get to the creating UI, you have the option to choose between a poll and a survey, which I kind of went over what the difference is. So we're going to go ahead and create a survey right now. And the one thing that you'll notice with the survey, you can give it a title, you can give it a message that's custom, that your team gets, encouraging them to complete the survey. You have the concept of doing it once or setting it up to be recurring. And the way it works for recurring is you can pick from one of these frequencies. So you could set it up to go out every Monday. So in this case, let's do weekly. And you can set it up to schedule it so it goes out, every Monday. So the next one that'll happen will be on April 30th at, let's go with 11 a.m. And what that does is it'll set up that schedule. So every single Monday at 11 a.m., there'll be some level of consistency where your team gets that recurring survey. You can obviously set up different levels of recurrence. So you could set it up to do daily. A lot of engineers like to do that to get a pulse on what the biggest issues are. They frequently might use that to replace a stand-up, where they might have a 3-question survey that goes out every single day, which is just a quick sync and a way for devs and product managers to give feedback to the rest of the team. So what I'll do for now is, you have this concept of templates that also exist inside your library. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to use one of these templates since it kind of pre-fills a lot of the survey UI with some questions. So, you can choose to send something like this to the entire general channel. And if you wanted to send it to a private channel, all you have to do is make sure that Polly has been invited to that channel before it shows up within this dropdown. We have various question types. So you can see this template has an open-ended question, a 1 to 5 scale question, a strongly agreed, a strongly disagree question, and a couple of other open-ended questions. So what I'll go ahead and do is add another question to this, and we'll use a 1 to 10 scale. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think you'd enjoy working with this candidate? So this is an interview feedback template. So once you complete an interview, you would basically send this out to all the folks that were in on the interview loop. You can enable comments. Please highlight why. And this comment prompt essentially will show up just to give them, just to give the user a bit of additional input to add or color to add to some of the score that they might have given. And you can always make questions required or make them optional. So then we have a few settings down here. There's this concept of sending it via direct message, and we encourage users to send this via direct message when you want the survey respondents to get a notification. So if it tends to be something more serious, something, for example, like you want to get feedback on an interview candidate, that's a good reason to send it via direct message. If it's something, say, more casual, where you might be just getting feedback on what color t-shirts you should order for the event, where you don't necessarily want to bother everyone, but getting the input would be nice. In that situation, we encourage to send it directly to the channel. These two settings show the level of transparency that you'd want in the results. So you can automatically allow respondents to see the results as soon as they complete the survey. And a lot of times, sometimes the comments are a little more sensitive, so you can choose the level of granularity of sharing that you want, whether you want to include just comments or also just the poll results. Then there's also this concept of anonymity. So we have 3 levels of anonymity. One is completely anonymous, and in completely anonymous, all the user information is removed from their vote, and you'll have absolutely no idea which member voted what. There is non-anonymous, where the username is attached. So for every vote that I would cast, it would show my name at Samir next to those votes. And then there's this concept of confidential. Confidential, we actually remove the username, but if you have uploaded demographic information, so for example, say geographic location, we'll show you those numbers in aggregate. So you'll be able to view how everyone in San Francisco responded, or how everyone in London or everyone in Singapore responded. So we basically give that level of granularity. So we'll just go ahead and send this survey. And it's basically that straightforward. So if I were to go to my Slack, let's go here to the right workspace. I guess it's taking its time to load, but essentially we'll kind of go over that survey later. What you'll see happen also, oh, actually, I think I had scheduled it, so it might not go out right away. But, we had this concept of templates. We have a bunch of templates for people to use, and these tend to act as ideas for you to go customize for your own team. And for some of these, they're just ready cookie cutter scenarios that you can just pick up and throw in and start using for your team. So we actually have a lot of teams that automatically use our, all hands meeting prep or all hands meeting feedback one. The team happiness survey is actually very popular, and we have hundreds of teams using it. So for this one on our business tier, we're actually able to give you benchmark scores of how you compare to the rest of the ecosystem. So what we'll go ahead and do is kind of move on to the next stage of another piece of functionality that exists, which is exports. Exports have been a very popular feature request for us over the past year, and we officially launched it a little over a month ago, and was available in beta a few months before that. So there's actually a few ways to do an export right from within a page when you're looking at, say, results for a survey or a poll. You'll notice this export button up here. And once you click this export button, it tends to take a couple of minutes to generate. These actually get queued up along with all the export requests that are going on within the Poly user base. And once the export's ready, you'll get a download button. I've actually already have it downloaded. And so in this case, I kind of downloaded the results from a given survey. So it was that exact survey that I was looking at. In this case, it's actually not an anonymous survey, so I will see the username. If it was anonymous, this username field would be blank. So you wouldn't see the user ID or the username, but you would still see how each individual user responded. So these were the three questions, how satisfied were you with the support and training that you got? How was your interview experience? And on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this place as a good place to work? So these results show up, and this allows you to run your own post-processing or potentially inject this into your own data warehouse, and allows you to build some level of automation on top of what Poly already has, if that's something your team needs. There's also the ability to generate exports from the export page. So what you can do from here is this essentially keeps a record of every export that you've ever created, so you don't need to regenerate one every single time you want to slice and dice new data. You can do things like a bulk export, which will essentially export all the surveys and all the polls that you've created into a single raw dump. Or you can go in and pick specific instances, whether it's a single one-off survey, whether it's a recurring survey. And if you pick a recurring survey, you have the ability to export all of the data, or potentially just the latest instance. So I'll take a look at a bulk export right now, and what you'll see in a bulk export, sorry, that was the wrong one. I believe it's this one right here. So with a bulk export, what you'll get is each vote that's processed represents a single line in the export, and we'll give you a bunch of information. And anytime it's anonymous, the username field will be blank. So that's an example of, and for example, in this case, now you're seeing usernames for these votes. That's because it was not anonymous. So any anonymous-based poll, the user information is stripped. And as I mentioned before, there's demographic information that could be included. In a completely anonymous question, you will not see any demographic information attached to their attached to their vote. But if it is either not anonymous or confidential, you start to see, that demographic information included here. So, full-time, intern, on the type of position they have, what geographic location they're in, or what department they might report up to. So all of this is available over here within the exports page. And you can always, download things over here. The one feature that we have that's part of the business tier is you can also set up a subscription. And an export subscription, the way it'll work is, you would basically define, since say, for example, it's a recurring survey that goes out every single week, what you could do is set up a subscription to get the new results for this survey every, 5 days after this survey goes out. And then directly in Slack, that export subscription will be delivered to you with a download link. So you can download those files and not have to actually come to the export page to generate this every single week. It's more of instead of a, push versus pull model, it basically lets you sit back and get the data automatically, which allows you to, not have to remember to go do this every single week. And it just helps in that automation of data and creating a workflow where you can actually focus on your work and the data just shows up. So the next area that we wanted to kind of go into, I alluded to it, was the demographics. And the demographic page, this essentially allows you to control the attributes or the segments that you might want to analyze your data in. And we realize that actually things change over time. Things change over time. So when things are changing over time, you may have something that was valid 3 months ago, but the roster has changed. So what you can do is you can upload a new demographic file with the updated roster. And, we have a sample CSV for you to download to show you what the format is. And you can take a look at that on your own time. But essentially, you're able to upload a file. And once that file is uploaded, we just give you a little preview to make sure that the right segments are being captured, where the first column is actually the email, and these are the other attributes that we've captured. So for example, office location, New York seems to be there. Years at company is another category. This screen here is meant to identify, just in case you've done a mismatch, where you might have department, and if you see New York here, your file is actually off by a bit. If we detect any errors, we'll tell you over here, hey, we actually didn't find these 3 email addresses. And what you can do is you can cancel the import, go back and fix it, or you can ignore these 3 fields and kind of just continue. So we'll just go ahead, ignore and continue. And because rosters change over time, you may have realized that this file actually, this one that was there previously, will automatically apply those demographics. So for example, if you're exporting results or if you're viewing it in the dashboard beyond a certain date, but this file might have actually only been valid back in Q1. So we'll say, it applies to results before March 30th. And then everything after March 30th will use this newly updated roster. Once you've actually uploaded this roster, what's available to you in, when you're drilling into the results, you'll notice things like these filters and crosstabs. So what you're able to do is filter these results and just boil it down to, let's look at only folks that are based out of the New York office. And once I apply it, you'll notice that this set reduced to a smaller subset of answers. And not only that, it also reduced these names to just that subset. So what you can do is you can drill down and just see, okay, well, me as we really need to focus on the New York office. That's an area where onboarding has been problematic. So let's drill down and focus there. And so the averages, the total responses, they'll all change. The other thing that you could do is, let's take a look at years at company. And I actually only want to look at people that have been here at least 3 years. And so what this will do, this will reduce it down to the subset of just 3 or more years. So you'll see that, the total response rate dropped to 117. That's the number of people that fall into one of those 3 categories. And what you can also do then is, the folks that have been here at least 3 years, but are also just on the West Coast. And so then it reduced it to that subset. So now what you have is an intersection of the folks that have been here for 3 years and that only work on the West Coast. And so you're able to do that either directly here, or you could also do this in the CSV export that you've gotten to basically drill down into these levels, this level of granularity. So what I'll do now is show you another option, which is crosstabs. And the cool thing with crosstabs is crosstabs essentially let you compare, one question to the next. So for example, if I'm looking at, on a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied were you with the training available to you during your onboarding process? Let's actually check how that compares to the folks that would recommend this company as a good place to work, even though they've only been here for a while. And what we essentially do is break that down into categories. So what now you can see is on the y-axis, you have the question of how likely are you to recommend this place as a good place to work? And you can see the distribution of the folks that gave 0, there were 5 people that actually gave it a 1. Now, what we did for this demo is we actually randomly generated this data, so it's pretty evenly distributed. But in a real life scenario, what you might see is there's actually a correlation between the folks that voted low on, how satisfied they were with the training that they were given and whether they would recommend this as a good place to work. And that allows you to look at clusters and allows you to identify areas of improvement for your company, looking at 2 different variables and 2 different kinds of questions. What I'll do is I'll actually look at, actually, let me go to the other window. Well, let me see if it's over here. Yeah. So what I'll do is let me drill down into, sorry, there we go. Let me drill down into one of these surveys where we can actually do a crosstab with, no, not in this one. It's probably in the other survey. Oh, right. I gotta go to my other user. So one thing that you're able to do is, we'll wait for this to load. I think it's taken a bit of time since I'm sharing my screen and my system's a bit slower. We'll actually show what the crosstab looks like when you're comparing to an open-ended question. So for example, you could have questions like, my accomplishments are recognized by others, and wait, I gotta go to the open-ended question. There we go. And compare this to, say, I am happy at work. So I think it's probably something wacky going on here, but normally what would show up is you would actually be able to break this down by, the comments that are just strongly disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. By clicking on one of these, those comments would be filtered here. I'll probably follow up with our devs to see if something went wrong in our staging environment. So this is currently in our staging environment, not in production. But you're able to break that data down as well over here. So yeah, the other thing that you can also do is you can also in a larger survey filter by responses. So if I'm looking at say question 2, I could say show me only the folks that, and this is just another pivot on the crosstab, but show me how people responded to this question, but only the ones that said strongly disagree on how happy they are at work. And this is probably the same error that's being triggered on the comment one. Let me just try this for a different question. All right, well, again, I think there's something up with the staging environment that I'll make sure our devs look into, whether it's happening in production or not. So that's kind of like a quick overview of some of the existing features that we have in the product. There's the opportunity to drill down into any one of these on their own. And we have videos that actually drill down into each of these sections. So whether it's survey creation, exporting, using demographic data, using filters and crosstabs. And so you can go drill down into any one of these sections on your own, or feel free to reach out to us and we can always point you to the right resources or potentially even kind of walk you through it in a support session. One of the areas that is coming soon, and it's actually already working in beta, and we're working with a handful of customers on right now, is the ability to generate trigger-based surveys. And so, for example, we have one customer that is currently we're working with to trigger a survey every time a specific emoji is added inside a specific channel. That whoever triggers that emoji then gets a survey. Based off of, like, they have a certain workflow where they have tickets being issued in that channel, and they have a specific emoji that triggers them claiming that ticket, and we key off of that event to then serve them up with a 3-question survey based off of them claiming that ticket. We have other folks that are looking to do things like onboarding. So when a specific user joins a channel, we're able to trigger an onboarding survey based off of that. And these are all use cases that are happening with our API, which is working, but in a very early beta. So for example, we have another customer at a relatively big company, and what they're doing is every time a tweet happens on their Twitter account, they're funneling that to one of 10 researchers that will tag the sentiment on that tweet. So that as soon as the tweet happens, that calls our endpoint, pushes a survey with that tweet, and they'll categorize that sentiment as positive, negative, or neutral. And then they're using that data to build their machine learning algorithms so that they can eventually, roll that kind of functionality out to the general public on being able to automatically triage Twitter sentiment. But they're using Poly to train that algorithm. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities here. There's some other customers we're working with to automatically populate the output. You saw the exports being generated, but using a callback API to actually push data into a live Google Sheets that they can either consume and base their logic off of, or push that data into their data warehouse. So these are all things that are coming down the horizon over the next quarter, probably, and they're already available in a beta. So if this is something you're actually interested in, feel free to reach out to us after the webinar, and we can see if it makes sense to pull you into the beta. So yeah, I mean that's all we had. There's been a few questions that came in advance before the webinar. And if you have questions, now would be the time to ask it, and I'll be happy to either show you that within the product, or potentially answer that offline if it doesn't make sense to go through that in the webinar.
Yeah, just as a reminder, you can ask a question in the Q&A, or you can just type it in the chat and send to just us, whichever you prefer. We'll give you guys a couple minutes to come up with them, if any, and if not, we'll just end it early.
Cool. So we had one question that came in before the webinar on the API, and the question was like, at what level of access will the API be available? Calling into an endpoint and triggering some of these surveys. Will it be available as part of the free plan or in one of the paid plans? Right now, since it's in beta, there isn't. We haven't actually figured out which plan it might fall into. What we're looking for are users with compelling use cases and real business need to actually use the API. And then we will determine, what usage-based model the API falls into and how it gets distributed across the different tiers. So that's on the API. And another question that has come up was around the availability of how it'll tie into Zapier, or whether it'll require dev resources from users' ends to actually use. That has a similar answer to the previous one, which is right now, it probably will require a little bit of dev resources, but once that feature is finished, we do believe it'll integrate into a Zapier, with Zapier, or potentially even if this then that, which will allow us at Poly and allow our user base to actually build recipes that'll tie it to Google Calendar events or other things that are going on.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with Zapier or if this and that, they're pretty much the same idea where you don't need a dev to do this. You can actually create these. You can plug and play these different products and align them together.
Cool. So if that's all the questions, I think as Nee mentioned, we can wrap it up early. There's always the availability to ask us questions afterwards. You can reach out to us on our support. There's a live chat option available on the site, or you can, email me directly, and that'll bypass our support queue, and we'll probably get you a response a little bit faster. So feel free to reach out to us. Some of the folks on the webinar we've already been in touch with. So, if we already have an existing thread, feel free to just reply to that as well.
Sounds good. All right. We'll go ahead and end this, and once we end it, it'll end for everyone else as well. All right. Don't forget, this is my email. Feel free to shoot any questions, and I'll be happy to respond.
Thank you.